we go now, baby. Right back into the action for another day of the week. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Before You Bet. Aaron live right here on the Covers YouTube and Axe channels. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like and that subscribe button right down there. So a great big show coming up today. John Middlekauff will be by here in a matter of seconds for his weekly appearance. A lot to get into. Very busy time in the NFL. Obviously, the second segment of the show, Jon Metler will be here. It's a big John show today. Of course, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the board tonight. And the NBA has some good-looking games in the association this evening. Okay, if you guys want to participate in the show, very easy to do so. Hit up that live chat on YouTube, on X. What do you like in the conference final games? What do you like in the NBA tonight? Let us know. We will read a few responses off throughout the course of the program. Okay, that's enough small talk. Let's go down to our man in Arizona, John Middlekauff. John, how you making out?
What's going on? Doing good.
Doing good. So a lot to get into here. Some NFL topics I'm going to throw at you. But before we get into those, let's put a little bit of a bow on the college football season. So the national championship game on Monday, a little bit of a talking point around the game is that it lost a little bit of juice this year. It's played a lot later than it was typically played. It was played on the heels of the NFL divisional round last year. It was played right after week 18 in the NFL, which is typically a little bit of a flat week. So people are saying the game didn't have the hype. Do you think the game lost a little bit of luster being played so late this year?
Well, I mean, we got to factor in they had a playoffs, so they added a bunch of games, right? They added that first round that did not exist and the second round that did not exist. So that's what the television networks want. That's what the schools want because it brings more money. I didn't see the final total, how much Notre Dame got, but obviously they got the most by far because they don't have to share it with a conference. I think one issue, if people are, inside college football, because it doesn't matter what the media thinks, is would they be willing to basically play like the NFL? Week. So the season ends Thanksgiving. You basically get 10 days till your next game and then 7 days till your next game. The problem is the NFL starts playing these games on Saturday and real estate gets taken up. So it's a convoluted issue, but if you tell me 20 plus million people watch the national championship on Monday, I do agree the buzz got lost a little bit. And part of it was obviously Trump gets inaugurated on Monday. But what do you can't do it after wild card weekend because the NFL plays a game on Monday. Now, could you have done it like last Thursday night and basically give them a week? I don't know. I bet everything's on the table, but they didn't. My pushback on everyone complaining is what else was there to watch on Monday night? Like, who cares? Like, what's the big deal? Watch the Warriors play the Celtics or something? I mean, what are we talking about? What are the other options? Was it really that big a deal?
Yeah, people just want something to complain about, something we have to get used to. Maybe bump it up to the Friday ahead of the divisional round might be a suggestion. But overall, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I want to get your 2 cents on that.
You could make the time between the games shorter. Sure. I think they tried to find some happy medium of not like before the games would end, the first week in December, and they wouldn't play a game till New Year's Day. And now they've kind of cut that down, but it's still not 7 days. Most of it felt like between the games, even if you played in the first round, were like 10-ish, 9-ish, 10-ish, or it's like, can you guys just play 7?
Okay, over to the NFL. Let's look back at the divisional round, then we'll look forward to games this weekend. So I'm watching the game on Saturday night, the Lions, Commanders, and multiple times throughout the game, they're saying Ben Johnson interviewing with multiple teams, Aaron Glenn interviewing with multiple teams. And this comes up every year. And when they're saying this, I'm thinking, well, that's probably not ideal really for the Lions. These guys, they want 100% of their focus on this game of the year, which is win or go home. And I'm guessing for these job interviews, they're not just showing up. I'm guessing there's a little bit of work involved so they can properly present themselves. So do you think that this head coach hiring process is a bit flawed where you have coordinators going through the interview process at the same time as when they're preparing for these big time playoff games?
I do think it's less difficult for the 1 seed teams because I was thinking about Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn did interviews the week of the bye. Well, the week of the bye, it's not like the regular season. You have no clue who your opponent's going to be, right? For the Lions as the 1 seed, it could basically be anyone 4 through 7. And it turned out to be, they end up playing the Commanders, right? But it could have been the Bucks. I mean, it could have been it could have been a lot of options. So it's like it's not like he's taking away a lot of it self-scout. They knew on Sunday night, right? So they could kind of dive into it. But I don't know. I mean, I have less of an issue with the coaches on the bye doing interviews as I do. I think Kellen Moore, again, a little unique because he knows Jerry, but did an interview 2 days before. I don't know this is a little like college football. Like, what is the solution? Is no one allowed to interview anybody that is still in the playoffs until after they're knocked out? Well, if I get knocked out in the first round, I have a huge advantage over a team that goes to the championship game or the Super Bowl. That doesn't seem fair. And then it's like, well, can I interview guys that are available? That doesn't seem fair. I just think this is one of those things that we could nitpick till the cows come home. I don't know if there's an easy solution. I guess you could just start a date. You're not allowed to do any interviews till, I don't know, Super Bowl week.
Okay, let's take a look at a few of the quarterbacks who stood out for the wrong reason here over the weekend. Let's start with Jared Goff. Early on in his career, this guy was a bit of a punching bag. You know, it seems like he kind of got thrown under the bus on the way out of town with the Rams. And then he had a little bit of a redemption story here with the Lions. But 4 turnovers on Saturday, including a pick 6. What's your view on Goff going into next season? Is this a guy you can trust in a big game going forward here?
You remember that game? I know you do because you're a Miami fan. Was it Christmas Eve or Christmas Day when they were playing the Packers and it came out later that Tua got concussed and it was
Ruined
like,
my day.
Is this the worst quarterback we've ever seen? It turns out like he just probably couldn't see straight. He clearly isn't that bad.
Yeah.
Jared Goff got elevated like he got hit by Chuck Liddell in his prime. And I have to wonder if that made him just kind of see stars the rest of the game, because he had, I would say last year, he kind of had a couple moments where outdoors it was still kind of a bugaboo, but indoors he had become a pretty dominant player. And this year, I mean, he was mostly flawless. Think how many games when they were in shootouts that he just dominated. I think back to the Detroit Lions Monday night game. I think back to the Monday night game against, they played Seattle in that Monday night game. I think they played the 49ers on the Monday night game. And it was like, there was no margin for error because of the defense, and he was elite. And in this game, he looked like the version that Sean McVay kicked to the curb. And we did see him not only get knocked out, but disappear for a minute, which was pretty crazy that Teddy Bridgewater was their number 2 quarterback. Shows you what they think of Hendon Hooker, but that's a conversation for a different day. I chalk this up more of like, he got, the modern day concussion. He couldn't see straight. He obviously played terrible and just picked an awful time. Because how could Ben Johnson, who's relied on him so much, call that double pass? And I know they run trick plays at Detroit, but that's the type play you make when you don't trust your quarterback. Clearly he trusts them because they've won so many games these last 2 years, right? I mean, last year they were the 2 seed. This year they were the 1 seed. And I think it's fair to say a huge reason they were the 1 seed isn't because of like linebacker play or the defensive line. It's him and the offense, right?
Do you think that offense takes a step back with Ben Johnson off to Chicago?
One thing that's going to be interesting, and we're recording this before Aaron Glenn has officially been hired, but it's pretty clear he's going to be hired. Are these 2 coordinators going to come from Dan's staff? Are they going to be elevated guys? Because if they are, you go, okay, these guys have been, especially if these guys have been long-standing coaches for the last minimum 2, potentially the whole time under Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, you'd feel more comfortable. Now, and I don't think they're planning on changing schemes or anything. So until we know the coordinator, it's hard to know. The offense is so loaded with players, and that's, listen, I applaud the Bears for landing Ben Johnson, but that was, I think a lot of coordinators would have looked pretty good. Like everyone thinks Brian Daboll's the village idiot. I bet if you made Brian Daboll or Mike McDaniel or some of these coaches that take a lot of crap right now, the offensive coordinator for that team, they look pretty good. It'll be very intriguing to see what Ben looks like with an offensive line that stinks with a quarterback who's kind of in the wilderness right now. So maybe I'm fascinated by who Dan, once these two, I mean, I guess Ben's official, but once Aaron Glenn, I would guess he elevates coordinators on his own staff would be my gut, but I guess you never know.
Okay, let's talk Lamar Jackson. So immediately after that game, the loss to the Buffalo Bills, a bit of a talking point on social media was people coming to Lamar's defense. I don't want to hear any Lamar Jackson slander. It's not his fault that they lost. And I was kind of, well, did you see the 2 turnovers? He threw an interception to a wide open Bills player, and that fumble he had was very sloppy as well. Now, he doesn't deserve to get killed by any means, but, this is a story we've seen before with him in the playoffs. So don't you think we kind of had to hold this guy to a different standard because he didn't play at an MVP level in that game, right?
Totally. I mean, listen, I actually think the media does Lamar a huge disservice by doing that. Orlovsky calling everyone a loser if they point the finger at him. Bill Barnwell going on a rant how he's better than Patrick Mahomes. It's like, guys, stop lecturing football fans. Depending on how old you are, we've all seen the Aaron Rodgers, the Peyton Mannings, the Tom Bradys. And if you're old enough, the Brett Favres, the Troy Aikmans, the Steve Youngs, like we know what it looks like. And no one disparages Lamar as like a great player. He has been incredible in the this year. He has mastered his version of playing. He was brilliant this year. He's won multiple MVPs. I don't know if he'll win one this year. Maybe not. The best version of Lamar by far was right now, up until that Bills game. And to act like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, like I don't have to look at their box score. It's about playing winning football. And winning football is in a tight game. This is not a 7-game series. So you can't have a game where it's like, hey, we got one hit. Or hey, we went 3 of 30 from three-pointer. Like this is 60 minutes. And one half. I mean, look at Notre Dame. They played an awful half of football, and it cost them the game. That's the thing. That's why we love this sport. There's so much urgency in the game. And those 2 turnovers, one of them literally led to a touchdown. So it's like, well, what was the final score? Well, they lost by a couple points. Well, do the math. So it's like, yeah, he was, as someone that bet on him last year, I thought he was atrocious in that game. He was better this game. But still, like a fumble. And the other thing is, and I think this is fair, I thought the coaches did a bad job. It's like, why didn't you run it why didn't you do the same game plan you did against the Pittsburgh Steelers? You ran it on a couple drives and they couldn't stop you. Derrick Henry looks like Shaquille O'Neal coming down the train tracks. But I think the pushback always is like, well, if that is the number one way for Lamar always to have success in big games, isn't that a little bit of a red flag? Like, yeah, I think at this point in time, there are 4 elite quarterbacks in the NFL that every team would jump in front of a train to get. Lamar, in no order, Mahomes, Allen, and Burrow. And based on what we've seen in the playoffs, Lamar is clearly 4th of that group. We've seen Burrow take down Mahomes. We've seen Mahomes become Brady 2.0, and we've seen Josh Allen now beat Lamar. And I actually think he's got a pretty good chance this weekend. And just overall his body of work, right? Josh Allen has been good in the playoffs. He's lost games. It wasn't his fault.
Yeah, Burrow can beat anyone on any given Sunday.
Sure.
Unfortunately, the Bengals can lose to any team on any given Sunday as well, right? Okay, let's talk Kansas City Chiefs and referees. So I tend to find it annoying, even going back to the Tom Brady days, of people complaining about the referees. This guy always gets a call. You see with LeBron when he's in the NBA Finals, all those years against the Warriors, when he was at the Miami Heat as well. And we've seen it throughout the season here with the Kansas City Chiefs. And like, if a 50-50 call goes their way, people are complaining about it. But I think it did get a little ridiculous on Saturday. D'Amico Ryan seems to be like a pretty level-headed guy, and he's complaining about it after the game. So what do you make of what appears to be preferential treatment for the Kansas City Chiefs from these referees?
Well, you and I watch probably an unhealthy amount of football. Like,
True.
the officiating is awful. Just in all you could watch a Giants-Jags game, and they're going to be, now you'd have to, if you're not a fan of one of those teams, have to have money on the game to watch that thing, but you and I would. The officiating is not much different game to game. It's atrocious. And listen, I am not for these calls, but they have been protecting the quarterback. Like Patrick Mahomes, we just see more of them because he plays in playoff games literally every single year, several of them. So, and that's by far the most people watching. But like Danny DeVito, I guess his name's Tommy DeVito, or Trevor Lawrence, or you pick your Will Levis, they get these calls too. I hate them, you hate them, we all hate them, but they are called. And they typically have, especially in the second half of a tight game, major impact on the winner and the loser. Now, if you want to crush Patrick specifically for his Chris Paul, James Harden thing on the sideline that he does, he did it earlier this year to Nick Bosa, and Bosa went on a long rant after, like, what are we supposed to do? I'm in total agreement. Flag Patrick Mahomes. If you're running out of bounds and stop, you're going to get flagged. But the hits on him, which I hate, are called for everybody, which they shouldn't. I mean, but that's just the way the league has pivoted since the CTE lawsuits. So you just deal with them. But like D'Amico's kicking a field goal into a frigid wind. It's like it's like trying to go for a par 5 in golf for 300 yards away over water. It's like, this is never going to happen. The play where on 4th and 10 or whatever, when clearly they were discombobulated, I'm not totally opposed to going for it. And I'm always anti-using a timeout in the second half of games because you typically need them on a delay of game situation because you need them for that final 2 or 3 minutes. But this is the playoffs, and this is like, you got to call timeout there if you are going to go for it. You have to. And he just stood there, and Troy Aikman's like, you got to call a timeout, because he could tell the quarterback was like, I'm not sure what's going on here. And it was a disaster. So it's like Andy, who, when I worked for him with the Eagles, you know, he had about a decade worth of everyone got on him for the clock management and situations. Mm-hmm. The Chiefs pretty buttoned up situationally. And I think looking back, it's like, well, maybe it was more McNabb than Andy, because he finally just got a quarterback who can handle this stuff. And the Chiefs handle those situations where D'Amico, who I love, like I think D'Amico is that props to the Texans. Like, they showed up to kick ass and take names, but like they weren't buttoned up on some things playing. These aren't just the champs. These are like the 3-time champs, the 2-time defending champs, the number 1 seed, like current Michael Jordan of football, the current Bill Walsh of football. You can't make these mistakes in the 4th quarter. But the calls, I get people being just furious about the calls. Every quarterback gets them, like it or not.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy thing to complain about. It's a pretty easy thing to piggyback on as well. You know, we can all agree that we do not like the referees, and especially with the calls going against a team that people don't like right now, the Kansas City Chiefs, right?
Well, I'll give you an example. The throw that Jalen Hurts, the bomb he threw to Devontae Smith, that was between 2 defenders, where Devontae just gets walloped. You don't even need to know where the shoulder went. Could have hit him in the head. Could have hit him in the stomach. They throw that flag 100% of the time. When I was a kid, that was just called a hospital ball. You're going to risk it. He might make an incredible play, or you might get him on a stretcher. Well, you throw that ball, and this is where Tom Brady pushes back about quarterback play. It's easier because you're allowed to throw that ball. Your receiver might get injured or whatever, but minimum you're getting a first down. Best case scenario, he catches it, but it's a lock first down. And it's like the rules since the lawsuits just have changed. Pro offense, pro quarterback. How is there anything such as a defenseless player in football? You're literally running a route with defenders all around. It doesn't exist, but that's a term we hear. You can't watch a game without hearing that term countless times.
Yeah, it does seem to come up multiple times per game. Okay, before I get your thoughts on the 2 games this weekend, which matchup do you think the NFL would prefer in the Super Bowl?
You could argue they can't lose now. I think you're in a situation.
But storylines all around.
Now, Josh Allen has built up. They're kind of heartbreak. I know they're a quote unquote smaller market, but they feel like a smaller market that's the equivalent to maybe like the Kevin Durant Oklahoma City Thunder, where it's like they were such a rock star team that it didn't matter. And obviously the Chiefs, I think the Chiefs have become the good version of the Cowboys. They're the number 1 rated team. They have the most famous quarterback. They probably have the second most famous player because who he's dating in Travis. They're just the historical stuff they're going through. And I think when you look at the NFC, like I have a hard time. Like I'm leaning the Bills. I have a hard time with this NFC game because you're like, well, how do you bet against the Eagles? This would be their second Super Bowl in 3 years. But is Washington just like a team of destiny? They got rid of Dan Snyder, and now they're, on the brink of a Super Bowl with this rookie quarterback who's, the Heisman Trophy winner, who's just become a superstar, who just took out the Lions. Then he takes out the Eagles. Like it'd be a pretty historic run. I don't think there's like some can't miss, like in baseball, it was clear once we got to like even the first round, it was like, God, Yankees, Dodgers be pretty incredible. Does it really even whenever I see like the ratings are down a couple percent, it's like 40 million people watched last year, 39 million people watched this year. The numbers we're talking are so astronomical. The Super Bowl's become, I remember going in the 90s, my buddy Michael used to have like Super Bowl parties when we were like.
Oh, John just cut out there.
We lost him.
We will see if he comes back on. We will give him a minute here. We will just check in on. Let's just give John a quick second here as we look ahead to kill some time here. If he doesn't come back, we'll hop into the NBA. But the two games here this weekend, no real movement on the line or the spread and the total. The Commanders still a 6-point dog, a total of 47.5. And Bills still holding strong as a 1.5 dog, total of 47.5 there as well. Okay, maybe what we will do is hop into the NBA with Jon Metler, and then we'll see if Middlekauff returns. We'll bring him on the back end because we got to get John Middlekauff's thoughts on these two games. That's what we were building up to here. Okay, John, it looks like Jimmy Butler to the Suns might be imminent. They did some weird trade for a bunch of first-round draft picks with the Suns. Break this one down for us.
Middlekauff's back. I don't know if you want to add him back in.
Oh, yeah, let's go. Let's throw back to John. Here we go. Some technical.
I don't know what happened. I just disappeared, and you disappeared, and.
Yeah, as we're building up to the most important part of the segment. So just to finish off on the best possible matchup for the Super Bowl. Yeah, I do think this is a year where they can't lose. It's rare that they would get a situation where they lose with the matchup. But a couple of years ago, when it was the Nick Foles Eagles versus the Tom Brady Patriots, the Jaguars, I believe, had a pretty healthy lead on the Patriots in that AFC Championship.
Yeah.
We almost got Blake Bortles versus Nick Foles in the Super Bowl, which would have been absolutely.
Do you think there's a specific matchup?
Well, there is exhaustion with the Chiefs, but there is, and people don't like them, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you have Josh Allen's easy to cheer for too, right? But I think a really good storyline is if you have the Kansas City Chiefs versus the young buck, Jaden Daniels, and this team that's red hot, and you have a new superstar. It's automatic. If Daniels gets, he's looking like the next big superstar right now, maybe the best rookie ever. But I think that's a fun storyline. Mahomes versus maybe the guy who he eventually hands the torch over to.
Yeah, I think one thing's proven, especially in the internet age, dynasties do work. I mean, the NFL exploded with the Patriots. And obviously they had one guy that had a chance to beat him, it felt like, over 2 decades. And that was Peyton Manning. It was like the only guy. The Ravens, they had some good battles too. But I mean, that was like Ray Lewis, Ed Reed. So they had a couple foes, and that's kind of what it feels like the Chiefs. Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and it's a pretty – everyone has an opinion. I was taught early on in radio, it doesn't matter if they hate you. You don't need them to love you as long as they care about you. And that's the Patriots had that much more than the Chiefs. Like a lot of people hated the Patriots. I do think the Chiefs are kind of building that up, and that's fine. The Dodgers have a chance to have this. Like that's going to be great for baseball.
Yeah, all that said, I no longer have a horse in the race. Obviously, the Dolphins didn't even get a sniff of the playoffs. The Lions were my bet and my pick at the start of the year and going into the playoffs. I was very sad to see them lose. So now my son and I, we hopped on the Bills bandwagon. Long-suffering fan base, the 4 straight Super Bowl losses in the 90s. It would be.
I think they win. I think they win. I think I saw a clip. the algorithm must know how I think of that Peyton Manning 2006. It might have been like January 2007, but that comeback in Indy. Now, it's not analogous because the Bills are going to have to go on the road to Kansas City, but it was just so many years. And I remember I was in college at the time. I just loved Peyton Manning. And it was like, God, why can't my guy do this? And I remember that was a really, really powerful moment because he like took down, the Michael Jordan Bulls or the Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
Like it was crazy. And then once he won that game, I don't think that would be the case if the Bills win this game and let's say the Eagles win by like 15, 20 points. Like the Bills would be no lock to win the Super Bowl. This isn't Dallas, San Francisco, 1993. But I think a lot of people, what would the line be, Bills? Because Chiefs win, they're favored in the Super Bowl. Are the Bills favored no matter what if they beat the Chiefs, or depend on how the Eagles look?
Man, the Eagles are a really well-rounded team. It will depend on how each team would win entering the Super Bowl as well. So let's hop into these two games here. Let's start with the NFC. The Commanders are a 6-point dog in Philadelphia, total 47.5. This is a team that is really peaking at the right time. Cliff Kingsbury doing an excellent job as the offensive coordinator. Stone cold Jaden Daniels on 4th down in the red zone. What do you think of the spread here? What's your prediction for the outcome of the game?
I feel like everyone with their heart just wants to hammer the Commanders and give them a shot. But if you remove your heart and you just watch football, man for man, the talent in these two games or for these two teams is not that close. Like if you put Jaden Daniels the way he was playing right now on the Eagles, they'd win the Super Bowl by 20 points. I mean, I think they'd kill the Bills or the Chiefs. Jalen makes you nervous because you don't now he's banged up. He's always a little banged up. They're always a little off. We'll have to see, in a weather game, it's obviously tough to play. So that would give the Commanders just slow down the game a little bit. But I feel like everyone wants to bet the Commanders. And I don't know. I feel like this is a really, really tough spot just from a talent perspective. That defensive line for Philly. This is one of the best defensive coordinators the last couple of decades in Vic Fangio with a ton of talent. And they just lost an offensive lineman to a torn ACL. Jalen Carter right now looks like, he's in Reggie White's body, but he's playing like Aaron Donald. He's an unstoppable force. And they have edge pressure. Now, it might be out, right? So their corner situation, they got Cooper DeJean. Slay's a little older, but Slay's actually bounced back from last year and been healthier, just been more solid. But if Mitchell's out, like Mitchell gave them a lockdown corner, and so Terry McLaurin, if you ever get him on Isaiah Rodgers, I saw some quotes from Frangio today, like, we like Isaiah Rodgers, like they will attack him if it's not like a torrential downpour of snow. If it's just cold, they will throw it at that guy relentlessly if Mitchell's out, right?
Yeah, it's a tricky game. I'm having a hard time with it. I do wonder if the Eagles are too dependent on the big play, the status of Hurts, if the Commanders will just be able to lock in on a game plan to shut down Barkley. A lot of questions.
Here's what I know. If the Commanders upset the Eagles, it would be a double whammy. The Eagles have lost NFC Championship games in the past. This would feel worse because obviously it's the Commanders. It's also the guy that owns the Sixers, and I think he's looked at like the guy that the Sixers were not great when he bought the team, but he's the guy that led the Sam Hinkie charge. He's the guy that's empowered this embarrassment, and then he goes and buys a team that the Eagles used to just kill, and then he beats the Eagles. Like I don't see how he shows his face in Philly. Like I've lived there for a couple years. Yeah. They love their sports. They love their Sixers. They love their Phillies. The Eagles it's like Alabama football there. If you live in Tuscaloosa, it would be, he would have to sell the team. I'm dead serious. Like, I just don't think he could function there.
Yeah, that's another interesting storyline, and those Philadelphia fans are nuts. I went to an Eagles-Cowboys game last year, and one of my thoughts is, as a dad who has young kids, I thought, I wouldn't want to bring my kids to watch a game here. Drunk people fighting in the stands saying "F the Cowboys," but they were saying the full word. It was a pretty intense scene there.
Teach him young.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I told him we were watching the game. I said, that is a rough crowd in Philadelphia. So he's got to learn a little bit about that. One of the players that he knows off the top of his head, he probably knows about three, is Patrick Mahomes. This is the main event of the weekend, the main event of the season until we get to the Super Bowl once again. The Buffalo Bills trying to get over the hump against the Chiefs in the playoffs. They are an underdog of 1.5, a total of 47.5. What do you make of this one?
I just think it's the time. I mean, it is the Bills winning that game against the Ravens. I think if you took all three teams, the Bills, the Ravens, and the Chiefs, and you remove the quarterback, we're all taking the Ravens team. I think once you factor in the coaches and stuff, you'd probably lean the Chiefs. But I do think the Bills, who have played the Chiefs really well. You go back to that game in Arrowhead several years ago where the rule was changed for overtime. Josh Allen was Patrick Mahomes and went toe-to-toe with him. And obviously Sean McDermott in the defense screwed him in that moment. But they have been just consistently mentally tough since that moment. Look at this year when they kind of changed their team and let guys go, had kind of a purge of some of their veteran players, traded Diggs, and they didn't skip a beat. And winning that game, and I know it was at home, but to me is a really, really big deal. I think they're the only team of the Ravens, the Bills, and obviously any other team in the AFC. I think the Chargers and the Broncos could have gone in with some like false bravado because they play them in the division, but no one actually would have thought they would have won. I do think the Bills can show up in Arrowhead and truly believe they can win. And I just think that they're the only team in the NFL. Obviously, the NFC teams don't have to do that, but you could take the Eagles, you could take the Lions. I don't know if they'd show up if they had to play at Arrowhead in a playoff game and truly believe. I do think the Bills will show up. The Bills will show up. Now, you saw there were moments in that game. It's like they're just not going to be big enough to stop Derrick Henry. Andy will run the ball, but they don't. Their run game isn't exactly that. So I do think the matchup is more conducive. And there is an element, like my first year in Philly, Sean McDermott was our defensive coordinator. And he, fair or not, it was above my pay grade at the time, but got fired. It was a pretty big deal. He had been there forever. Like he coached for a long time under Andy Reid, worked with Jim Johnson and John Harbaugh. So it's like the AFC's really turned into the Andy Reid show, like all his guys. And I think there's just like there was a toughness to the Bills team that I think the last 3 or 4 years, like they're physically, like they're not rolling out Bruce Smith, right? I mean, their team is not like you're watching them against the Ravens. They don't look as big. Some of their guys are falling back, but they were not scared. And I do wonder if that game propels them. They win this game. Listen, the Super Bowl would be hard if they got to play the Eagles, assuming Jalen's healthy. But I think this is just kind of their Peyton Manning 2006 moment. And Josh Allen, obviously, if he got to the Super Bowl and won it, what would anyone even argue then? The Lamar and him argument would be put to bed. And even the Burrow thing, like Burrow got there, had his chance, and they didn't get it done.
Let's go Buffalo. They are due. It is time.
But I feel like I've bet on the Chiefs a couple years ago. Bengals beat them. Bet against them for a couple times. They always burn me.
Yeah, it's a tough one. The only result I'll be surprised with in that game is if one team blows out the other. It should be a good game. We do look forward to that. So, John, we'll leave it at that. Enjoy the games this weekend. Best of luck with all the bets you place, and we'll look forward to discussing the Super Bowl matchup with you here on the show next Wednesday.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Indeed. There we go. A little bit of technical difficulties, but we handled that like pros, picked it right back up. Okay, let's go to our other John. And John, this is getting a little confusing with two Johns on the show every Wednesday. Would you be willing to take on a different first name to help us avoid some confusion here?
Fun fact, John is actually not even my first name. So that would make it pretty simple.
Well, what's the first name?
We're going to throw HR through a loop here. My first name is actually William.
All right, William. So Jimmy Butler, the trade to the Suns appears to be imminent. Break this one down for us, William.
Yeah. So yesterday they only had one first round pick, 2031. Everyone wants it because they assume the Suns will be really, really bad by the time 2031 happens. Not so sure about that. I think they're just going to spend their way through all of this. So they ended up trading it to the Utah Jazz, and they got back 3 first round picks because they obviously they want more. They just don't want to send one for one trade. They also can't aggregate salaries, so they would have to send one. So now they got 3 back. It's basically the Cavaliers or the Timberwolves draft first round picks for 3 years. That's what so they're obviously getting really, really close to a trade. Jimmy Butler is going to the Phoenix Suns. It's going to happen. And it does feel like So last night it came out Bradley Beal would waive his no trade clause to the Milwaukee Bucks, but now this morning you're kind of hearing that it actually might be to the Chicago Bulls, and Billy Donovan was a coach at Florida when Bradley Beal was at Florida. So that kind of makes sense as well. And it sounds like the Bucks want Zach LaVine, and none of these teams can really, they can't. So if you're over the second apron, you can't put like two salaries to match one. It has to be like 1-for-1, and the Suns are over the apron. The Bucks are over. So you could very well see Jimmy Butler to the Suns, Bradley Beal to the Bulls, Zach LaVine to the Bucks, and then Chris Middleton to the Heat, because all those salaries kind of start to line up. Obviously, there'll be first-round picks.
That's a raw deal for the Heat, it would appear. Well, they'll get a bunch of first-round draft picks.
They'll get the first-round picks. So there'll be first-round picks included in all of that as well. From like a championship, like if this goes down, what you expect to see in the futures market, I don't think it moves the needle for the Bucks at all. Like Zach LaVine beside Damian Lillard, it's two guys who are offensive and don't guard. It's just, that doesn't make much sense to me. It's better than what they're getting from Chris Middleton. I think they're almost like the Suns, right? They're like backed in a corner where you have all these championship pieces and you got to make some form of a move. I mean, the player they need beside Damian Lillard is Drew Holiday. they get away for Damian Lillard. But from the Suns' perspective, I actually think it makes them a lot better with Jimmy Butler, because Jimmy Butler brings that like grit of defense, which they don't really have. They look like they're starting to create that kind of that roster the Mavericks have, where it's like, hey, Kyrie, Luka, that's your Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and then Ryan Dunn, Jimmy Butler are kind of like more off pieces and defensive, and then Nick Richards just like protect the rim lob threat with Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford. So from the Suns' perspective, I like it. For everyone else, I don't.
Yeah, if you're a Suns fan, you got to respect the hell out of what they're doing, because they traded a boatload of shit for Kevin Durant. They bring in Beal, and you look at their record right now. If the season ended today, I don't know, would they'd be in the play-in, I think, but it's not going very well. But they keep throwing shit at the wall, right? So credit to them, credit to the owner, and you can say like, hey, they're giving away all their draft picks. This is going to affect the future. If this is a destination where free agents want to come to, you're not going to have to worry so much about that. It's funny about Bradley Beal, though. If he goes to the Chicago Bulls, watch him start posting, averaging 30 points a game again, like he did when he was with the Wizards, who are winning, 30% of their games. So,
yeah, I could see that too. I honestly could see that if he becomes the number one option. It feels like a very Chicago Bulls move too, right? Get the brand name, get the guy who was a superstar in the past, and just still be very mediocre, but you'll have a good guy.
I like LaVine to the Bucks, so I think that they'll be flawed defensively, but he's obviously younger than Middleton, gives them another great scoring option. They can always have two of those guys on the floor at the same time, type of thing, especially in the playoffs when you do shorter rotations. So, yeah, I would like to see that. Okay, so we have 6 picks. And my picks yesterday were awful. I went 0-2. So I picked the Orlando Magic. I had a big case for them. They were favored by 1.5 against the Raptors. And the big case was, hey, the Magic stink lately, but they've stunk against pretty good competition here there, going against the Toronto Raptors, one of the worst teams in the league. I'm watching TV with the wife. I checked the score in the first quarter. The Magic are up by 21 points, John, in the first quarter. I say, we might as well count this as a win, is what I'm thinking. Then they come out the second quarter. They score 13 points. The third quarter, they allow 40. They end up losing the game by, I think it was 13 points. So that didn't go very well, and I learned my lesson betting on the Washington Wizards. I guess you could say I got too cute with that. So that did not go well. Okay, let's get
they were in it for most of the game there. They just fell apart in the fourth.
Yes. Okay, let's get into tonight's action. The effort's absolutely there, and it was there today. So we will look to bounce back. Hopefully some good reads here. 3 picks for me. Let's start things off with Minnesota Timberwolves down in Dallas. I like the T-Wolves here. They're favored by 2.5 points. I think this is a really good spot for them. It is a desperation spot for Minnesota. Consecutive losses versus good teams, by the way. They lost by a bucket to the Grizzlies. They lost to the Cavs as well. But they're desperate for a win here. I think their foot's going to be firmly on the gas versus the team that knocked them out of the playoffs last year. And this is a lesser version of that rival that they're playing tonight, because the Dallas Mavericks have been really bad with Luka out of the lineup. They're 24th in net rating over the last 10 games, 2-8 against the spread in that span. And this is good defense. Some might say really good defense versus really bad offense. So third in opponent EFG shooting percentage over the last 10 games for Minnesota versus 25th in effective field goal shooting percentage for the Mavericks. These teams played on Christmas Day. Minnesota held them to 99 points. So like a bounce back for them to win by at least 3 points tonight. Let's go to a name I've heard a lot here on the show here in 2025 so far, Tim Hardaway Jr.
Yeah, I feel like every season we have a couple guys where it's like you just don't expect to have this many bets on them. Definitely don't expect to have an over assist for Tim Hardaway Jr., but that's what we got, over 1.5 assists, minus 110. This actually came to be it last night. Tobias Harris was kind of showing an edge to the over on his points prop. And there's nothing I enjoy more than betting the over on Tobias Harris for points. And I was kind of watching film on the Atlanta Hawks game when they played them last time. And Tim Hardaway Jr. started to pop off the page from like an assist standpoint because he was the one dishing it to Tobias Harris. So that's actually how this bet came to be. And it makes a ton of sense when you think about it. It's like Dyson Daniels, really the best defender by far on the Atlanta Hawks. He'll be on Cade Cunningham. He's the one guy on the Pistons you need to take out of the game if you're going to slow down their offense. So from like initiating offense, why are you going to go against Dyson Daniels? They obviously will because Cade Cunningham's a good player, but you could just see usage push a little bit more because it's a lot easier for Hardaway to make those passes to start the offense when you're facing Trae Young. And that's what I saw on film. And that's when you look at the last time they played, he had 5 potential assists, 4 assists. I mean, 5 potential assists isn't that high, but we're talking about a total of 1.5. It really stands out. And in that game, Jaden Ivey was playing. So Jaden Ivey's out. Obviously, Tim Hardaway's minutes are a lot more secure now. They're off to Saturday for this game. They have 2 days off after this. So you always like that from like a starter's minutes projection. So give me the over on Tim Hardaway.
Okay, John, I think the game of the night going down in Houston, I think that's fair to say. The Rockets are favored by 2.5 points against the Cavaliers. The Rockets coming off an ugly loss at the hands of the Pistons. This is a team I like to back after a loss. I think they're 9-3 ATS after a loss, but 2.5 points. It's the Cleveland Cavaliers who are so good during the regular season. So no spread bet for me, but I do like a play on the total. I'm going to go over 230.5 for this one. So check out the body of work from these teams lately. Second and fourth in offensive rating over the last 10 games. The Cavs averaging over 120 points. The Rockets averaging 116.5. Now, very impressive on the offensive end of the court. You cannot say that about these teams defensively, though. 14th and 22nd in defensive rating over the last 10 games. Houston is 29th in three-point defense and opponent EFG shooting percentage. The Cavs 22nd in points allowed. And this is one I've pointed out before for the Cavaliers. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe not, though. But consecutive unders are rare for Cleveland. They're coming off an under their last game out, a span of 20 games where they haven't gone under in consecutive games. These teams have combined to go over this mark of 230.5 13 times already here in 2025. So we'll go over for Rockets, Cavaliers in Houston. 2 props for this one, John. Let's start with Jared Allen.
Yeah, Jared Allen over 13.5 points. It opened 12.5, about minus 125. You can find 13.5 minus 105. It's actually really, really close. It's the juice. It's 1 point higher, but it's significantly less juice. When you're looking at the Cavs, it's been the theme all season with the Cleveland Cavaliers is their starters don't play minutes because they literally just blow everyone out and they're always sub 30. Well, Jared Allen, he has an edge on this number with a sub 30 projection. Like if you're like 29 minutes, you have an edge on this. The thing is Evan Mobley's out. So it's not like they have to pick and choose which big they might play. It's Jared Allen. Jared Allen is playing those minutes. And like you said, this is a competitive game. Cavs are favored by 2.5 on the road. So you should see a tight game. And I just feel like this is, neither team's on like a back-to-back front end, back end or anything like that. So I feel like you should see minutes from both sides. And then you specifically to Jared Allen's matchup, he's playing against Alperen Şengün. So I just feel like that should play as well. He should be able to convert around the rim. He gets a lot of hustle points, like rebounds, dunks, alley-oops. He's not going to do anything that spectacular, but I feel like that should play for him tonight. And 13.5 just feels a little too low considering the matchup and the minutes that could potentially be there for him.
Okay, next up, Jalen Green. What do you like for him, William?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So Jalen Green's really weird from like an assist standpoint because if he's playing like the Hornets, you're concerned he's literally just going to shoot everything. Like he obviously has matchups he can take advantage of, but you're concerned he won't pass. So like a couple weeks ago, we played the over on his assists. It was against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I was saying, when you're playing a good defense, you kind of need your best players to create. And I feel like that plays tonight against the Cavaliers as well. But you also need the defense to be able to kind of like force a pass out of him. And I feel like the Cavs can do that. So it's like, you kind of like marrying this, like he should be on the ball a lot. He should be able to create against the Cavs, but they should also be able to stop him in some capacity, because I feel like that's important for Jalen Green to force him to pass. And it is the same thing as Jared Allen. It's just, again, competitive game. I feel like the minutes should be there. He also, he's only playing around last couple of games. He's only played around 30 minutes, but they're off till Saturday. And this feels like a game that Ime Udoka, the Rockets, they're trying to build something there. This feels like a game at home against the Cavs, best team in the East, that they would want to have. And it feels like one of those games where you could push Jalen Green up to like 35 minutes. So for that, and again, no Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley is a big part of both of these bets because he's someone who ruins potential assists. So he's out. So I like the over on Jalen Green.
Okay, let's wrap things up in Sacramento. The Golden State Warriors are in town. I faded the Warriors. I think it was on Monday with the Boston Celtics in town. I'm going to fade the Warriors again. Give me the Kings as a 7-point favorite here. So we were pretty critical of the Mike Brown firing, more of the way how they did it, I guess. But maybe it was the right decision, because the Kings have been really good with Mike Brown no longer on the sideline for them. They are 5th in net rating since canning Brown. Versus some pretty solid competition in there as well. The Rockets and Celtics over the past couple of weeks, to name a few. So that's a span of 11 games where they rank 5th in net rating. During that same span, the Golden State Warriors are 25th. They're limping into this game. No Draymond Green. The Warriors are really struggling on the defensive end. They're 26 in points allowed per 100 possessions over the last 10 games. Kings, surprisingly, are 4th in that category defensively, 6th in that category offensively. So a couple edges there for them. And Sacramento has destroyed them the last few times they played. They played recently back on January 5th. They won by 30. Towards the tail end of last season, they beat the shit out of them again. They beat them by 24 points. Let's go, Sacramento. Kings. -7 points. Okay, hopefully bouncing back tonight in the association. Let's check out the recap graphic. Timberwolves -2.5. Cavs Rockets over 230.5. Kings -7. Tim Hardaway Jr. over 1.5 assists. Jared Allen over 13.5 points. And Jalen Green over 2.5 assists. 10 out of 10 on the recap graphic. I believe that is 2 days in a row now. Producer Mick is ultra focused like a laser. Good job by him. And good job to both of my guests for joining today. Thank you to John and William for joining today. Thank you to producer Mick. Did an especially good job with that recap graphic. Thank you to our sponsor, BetMGM. Make sure you check them out for all your sports betting needs. And the biggest thank you of all goes out to all of you, our great viewers, for tuning in, especially those of you who participate in the live chat. If you're watching the replay of the show, hit up the comment section right down there on YouTube. What is your best bet for the NFL this weekend? What is the best possible Super Bowl matchup? What's the worst possible Super Bowl matchup? We want to know. Let your voice be heard. So that does it for today's show. We're going to be right back with you guys tomorrow. William will return for a look at the NBA. And Jake Butt will be here. We'll put a bow on the college football season. And I want to get his thoughts on the Mark Andrews situation with that awful fourth quarter that he had. Jake, as a former player, will be able to provide some pretty good insights for that. So until then, thank you guys for tuning in. Best of luck with your bets tonight. Let's go Kings. Woo!